There's 5 levels of automation for autonomous vehicles. Well, you have an idea of 5 levels of how cities can help that path. Why don't you tell us, Matt Peak, what these 5 levels are?
Sure, absolutely. So, we've modeled different communities around the world. What we do is we aggregate a lot of information. We've looked at the various companies that are working in the autonomous vehicle space. We looked at the various, automakers, the investors, a number of different categories. And one of those categories are regions that are going forward with their own independent actions to either plan for or accelerate the arrival of autonomous vehicles. And when you look at all of these regions, and right now we've aggregated 92 and counting from around the world that are taking different levels of actions. You can break these actions down into different categories, and we call those dimensions. There's 5 different dimensions that range from, appropriate funding for the initiatives, whether that be private capital or public capital, public education, giving the public a tangible connection to these new vehicles, policy, and so on and so forth. These 5 dimensions don't have to operate in isolation. They can be combined with each other, either independently combined or strategically combined. And many communities have done this. It just depends on what their goals are, to see how they deploy these. Looking at these dimensions, we can categorize levels of activity of these regions around the world in the same way that NHTSA does for autonomous vehicle technologies, going from level 0, which is basically a region that hasn't taken any action to either plan for or accelerate the arrival of autonomous vehicle, all the way to level 4, which is multi-dimensional activity in a very strategic and coordinated way. So it's really an aggressive approach that permeates society. Every area in between represents the number of dimensions that are actually included in the community's activity, as well as how closely those dimensions are coordinated.
So I imagine a big part of this is breaking down the silos that would normally exist in the city to get things done, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and we see that in different areas. Let's take an example of what we consider a level 4 community region, and that's the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, passed and funded a very aggressive and comprehensive plan to research and implement virtually every aspect of autonomous vehicle technology, ranging from connection to mass transit hubs, looking at public connections, so actually giving public the opportunity to participate in demonstrations, looking at insurance, so the ways that autonomous vehicles are going to affect insurance, involving private industry, so really engaging the British automakers in an effort to orient technology and technological development down in a way that is best, for the United Kingdom. And they're doing that because they want to be the leader. But it very much falls into, the category of what you say, the silos. What are the silos? What are the barriers? What are the unanswered questions? And what different dimensions, what actions within the different dimensions that we have can be taken by regions to overcome these? And so, UK is one area, Singapore is another area.
So is land use playing into what they're doing as well, and that as one of the dimensions?
Increasingly, yes. I'd like to see it more, included in that. There's a lot of potential for autonomous vehicles to serve as feeders to existing transit hubs. And you do see some communities around the world that have begun to investigate that. But as far as really a concerted effort to deploy vehicles in a strategic way to augment existing investments in public transportation lines, there's a lot of room for that to grow.
You were just moderating a panel about Columbus, and it's out there in terms of the cities in America with its recent win. Any takeaways there as far as the public-private partnership? How did they have the private partnership and win it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the public-private partnership, was really brought together by the DOT, and it is an aggregation of complementary industry members that can help fill gaps in fulfilling the visions that the communities have put forward for their smart cities. And it's exciting to see this approach take place because anybody that's been in this space has seen the headlines with regard to investments, private industry investments that have been made to advancing these technologies, really rapidly commercializing the technology. So why not build off of that? Why not leverage them? The panel covered, three different aspects. First of all, how do we model communities? Before we even, take a shovel and start reorienting the communities, what are the tools that we have at our disposal to do that? How do we use technologies to connect vehicles to each other, to infrastructure, the so-called V2X technologies in the automotive space, but then also specifically the sensors and other instruments that are going to be involved in automating vehicles, in facilitating the aggregation of information that's going to inform all of the V2X coordination and decisions and whatnot. So, private industry was a huge part of this. It also helped to answer one of the core questions that this Smart City Challenge was trying to answer, which is how do you enable all members of a community to participate in the gains that autonomous vehicles and new technologies can bring to bear instead of just one segment of the population. Columbus was really visionary in doing that by including one of their communities that has a very high infant mortality rate and proposing specific approaches for overcoming that. And these definitely include, the inclusion of autonomous vehicles, but it goes beyond that as well. It uses, mobile technologies and existing transit technologies to coordinate the approaches and connect people with physicians and others that can help them.
Well, and you get a lot of other benefits like the mapping of the roads and the safety of the buses that are coming out of this planning process, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of going to be the key efforts, and it's going to be so exciting to see the amount of information that's going to be collected from this, the detailed maps that are going to come about, the way in which the information is then utilized to inform subsequent decisions, whether that means refining the Columbus process, as information starts to be collected, or more excitingly, deployment to other cities. How do we use these technologies that are going to be deployed, the collection of information, the knowledge and insight that we get as to how people use this to then inform our decisions going forward and really enable, widespread connection to autonomous mobility and other services afforded by technology.
Back to the 90 million that Columbus was getting from business, how did they, going into that award process, form those relationships? Were those already set in stone, or how'd they do that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it was basically a very aggressive approach to win the award. Columbus, set out to win the award, and they knew that private industry could be, a partner in their efforts, but also that private industry investment could also speak volumes, in winning the award. So, they engaged local community members, stakeholders, those that could potentially benefit from, the deployment of, new technologies, investors and so on and so forth, and really made an aggressive pitch saying, we'd like to win this $40 million from the DOT, and we'd like you to benefit from this. Would you like to invest, in some component of this vision? And so it was a very beneficial approach. I mean, both to those that put up, the 90 million, but then also now to Columbus, who has $140 million to play with.
That's huge, and it speaks to the comment made by the Autodesk gentleman about the idea of community engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. That was such an integral process, and to me, it's really an essential component of any city's vision for advancing its transportation platform. Is that, how do you create a society that enables mobility, that doesn't just enable car ownership or transit pass ownership or whatnot, but actually facilitates the flow of people and goods from here to there. And you have to involve the community to do that. You have to see how different regions, citizens and members are actually using technologies. How do they want to get around? And what does that tell us for how the systems that we'd like to deploy should be deployed? It's going to differ from city to city, from region to region. There's going to be some similarities, but at the same time, involving the community at these early stages of planning, getting their input, getting their feedback, but then also aggregating their data as they begin to use the system is absolutely essential.
Excellent. Well, Matt, I appreciate your time.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.